So my first question is about the PhD students at Warwick. So do they have to submit a research management plan, data management plan at some point in their studies? And what is this point? Like at an early point, at a later point?
So at Warwick, we have, it's not a compulsory for our unfunded PhD to submit their data management plan, but as we have a policy in place to make sure that they have the data management plan put in place for their project. So if a supervisor we can ask, they can actually produce to us. But there are some funded PhDs from certain UKRI funders who have a compulsory requirement to have a data management plan. So it all depends where does that, the rules falls into place.
Okay, I see. And my second question is, what is the attitude of PhD students and researchers to this, issue of data management? I mean, it's very useful. It's kind of common sense practice, you would say, but still, it feels like a nuisance sometimes.
Yeah, I do understand, because I'm also coming from the PhD side, and I also felt, but what I found from the student side and also the early career researchers, if we show them this data, at one point, if you show them this subject, it may look like a dry subject. It's not really interesting. It's, as you said, it's very common sense. But if you show them through the case studies, what happens if you don't do this? There are lots of incidents happen. Let's say a few months ago, some cloud server went down, and if your data is not there, what can happen? Some real examples. So I provide this in my case studies to my students. And when they see these things, they really feel like, oh, I didn't think like that. Data can be so much valuable if this happens or that happens. For example, showing them the live examples of institutional data sets deposited and also reused by others. So making them aware that data set is not only yours, but others can also use it and they can cite you. So showing them the benefits of the data. So I think in this way, including some interesting case studies, showing them how it can actually be good for them in making them research output much more visible, can be a bit more interesting for students. Okay, so I do see sometimes struggle. Yeah.
Yeah, I see you've managed to persuade them, like to show them the good sides, obviously.
Yeah, it's not always easy, but yeah, it's always like working together, making sure that there's a good side of it.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here by Gregor Završnik. So do you distinguish between backup and archiving? And if so, how?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So backup, you can say, like, if you're during your project, you are collecting a lot of data, raw data, and you're actually storing on a network attached storage recommended by your university, or you're keeping an encrypted hard drive. So you can categorize that as a backup. It could be openly accessible, closed accessible. Most of the time it falls under the closed access, means only you or other people who are authorized, let's say your supervisors, can only access that data. But the archiving is a very end stage, second end stage of the research data lifecycle. Archiving is like you use some part of your data, not all of your data, to basically retain it so that after 5 years, after 10 years, you can reuse it. So backup is like you're keeping lots of data during your project, but you're archiving it only a certain set of data, which is very useful for your project or your publication, which can be used to produce certain results. So there is a bit of difference between backup and archiving.
So do you know who accesses your data? Like how many views do you have? Like who are the people looking at it?
So in public repositories, sometimes you can see that they have these counters. Yeah. So at Zenodo, you can see for other biotech. At NCBI or EBI, I don't think they have any. They might have this somewhere internal, but you don't get this. Yeah.
So sometimes you do, sometimes you don't.
Yeah. So yeah, internally we are not looking at that, of course. This depends, yeah.
Okay, and another question. So you are a researcher. I mean, you all are researchers at the institute. So how much time do you spend on data management on average?
Yeah. So we are trying to do this simultaneously, as I said. So one nice example is that we have technicians. So one of our technicians is doing qPCR in the lab, and if you bring her a set of samples, she will say, "Okay, I will do qPCR, but first, just send me an Excel that is or where you have stored the metadata about your samples. So if you don't have this, I'm not gonna do it, because then she will produce data and she has to put into the machine already the names, the IDs of samples, and that's how you kind of force people a bit to produce metadata. And also for all new projects that we are starting, we are already starting this PISA tree structure, and everybody has access to this, and we are all working on it and improving the metadata. Of course, sometimes you don't have time, and then you just kind of press enter through this through the wizard or the batch script, but afterwards you can check. We have to write something for the title, for description also, So basically, it's some middle way, not trying to enforce too much, but still this minimum, so that it's organized and that our bosses, our PIs, have some overview of what we are doing.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, and also, I mean, you have a lot of data, as you've shown us.
And we have, of course, we have people working in the wet lab and people working in the dry lab, and we have to communicate. So not everybody is analyzing his own data. So that's important.
Yeah. Dr. Slavec, you're active in Mlada Akademija, so Young Academy of Slovenia, and its European counterpart, Eurodoc. So the question is, are there any data-related activities at these two organizations for PhD students?
Yes, of course. So inside the Young Academy of Slovenia, Mlada Akademija, we are organizing every year an event about open science in general, and inside that we always have something also related to data. And the last 2 years, the event was online, so you can, on the YouTube page of the Young Academy of Slovenia, you can find the video of the different webinars we organized. It took place in November. And we are also participating in the policy making in this area. So this is what the Young Academy of Slovenia is doing. And the Young Academy of Slovenia is also a member of Eurodoc, which is the European Association. It's like a federation of different associations of early career researchers, so doctoral students and other early career researchers in Europe. And inside Eurodoc, there is also a working group for open science. I was the co-coordinator of this group for 2 years. Now I'm not the co-coordinator anymore, but we have one co-coordinator from Slovenia. She's Maja Dolinar. She's also, I mentioned her at my slide about the RDI note for Slovenia. So she's also the contact person for the Research Data Alliance note, and now she is the co-coordinator of the Open Science Working Group. And the Eurodoc Working Group, what they're doing is mostly focusing on open access. So they were really involved about the Plan S initiatives and published a statement about that. They are providing feedback to different organizations to the European Commission, to different associations of universities and research institutes in Europe, also to UNESCO. And they are trying, so they are they're following the policy making in this area, and they're contributing the view of early career researchers in these issues, because there is a lot of happening on the European level regarding open science and also data. So the organization is trying to be active and following all this development. They were also active in the project of, how is it called? So so now it's celebrated 1 year. So the new the new venue for publishing research papers, Open Research Europe. So DRUGI was also involved with that, and providing the view of early career researchers and feedback, and they're organizing events about that and so on.
Okay, I see.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah. Okay. And Moita Kotar has also posted something like a link to Mlada Academia on chat. I have a question for you. So you say that data has to be made open according to FAIR principles. So the financiers require that, but who checks whether it's open in the right way?
That's a really good question. So for now, nobody's doing that. So there is no control. So this is something that might change. Hopefully it will change in the future, but for now, it's a work in process. So there is this development in Europe towards making everything more open. And what is happening now with publications, there is already some control. So if you're a researcher and you're receiving funding from the European Commission or also from the national funders, they're going to check. So you published a paper, is this paper open? And if it's not, then you're not following the contract. And for now, regarding data, you have more freedom because you need to do a research data management plan, but at the end, nobody controls if what you promise in the research data management plan, if you are really implementing that. But in years, this might change and the controls might become more strict, but I see it as a good thing because I and also other presenters, they have mentioned the managing of the data according to FAIR principles. You're not doing it for others. You're doing it mainly for yourself to be more organized, to be more organized, more effective, and so because the primary user of your own data is usually yourself, and so it's something that's happening. So it wouldn't be fair to expect researchers to, from today to tomorrow to change everything and accept these new rules, but it's some process. So every year, more and more researchers are adopting these procedures and trying to make their data more fair, more open. But it's not something that can happen, in a few months. So it's a process that takes time, and this is why it's important that, not to wait the day that it will be enforced, but researchers should already now look into it and try to make their data more fair. So to make the data more user-friendly.
So it seems we're given a bit more time to adapt to this new system, and also you mentioned that a very small amount, percentage of data is actually reused. Do you know why and how much and why so little?
Yeah, I heard some statistics. So I don't know now the exact number, but the one I heard. It was really, really low, so surprisingly low. So there is a lot of data that is collected and it's never, not only reused, it's not even used. Some researchers that just collect data and then this data is never used. So this is something that also often happens. And, with this data, it's a lot of resources go in the collection of this data. So it's really a waste of resources that this data is never used. or that it's used just for one research project, when this data could be used in many. So it's about the effective use of research resources, because the researchers were always complaining that there are not enough resources for research. But actually, it's also us that we are not using these resources we have effectively. And so given that this is an event for doctoral students, there is something in my heart that I always try to say at this kind of events. As a statistician, I always often other researchers come to me and ask me for some maybe advice and help with their doctoral dissertations and so on. Not only doctoral dissertations, also master thesis and so on. And there is one issue that always bothers me. Sometimes I suggest, you should look into already existing data. So, you don't have the resources to collect your own data, or maybe you have them, but not enough to collect really good quality data. So why don't you just reuse the data that already exists? But then they say, no, this is not original enough. So I should not do that. They want me to collect my own data. For example, in social sciences, the advisors, they always tell you, you should conduct your own survey. But we have on the European level many initiatives, many surveys that are collecting data for other researchers for it to be reused. And so there is so much data available everywhere. And I think it would be good for advisors to change this mentality that reusing data of other researchers, that this is not original enough. This is not true. You can be original also when you're using data. And I don't see the need for somebody, especially if they're doing the master or first level thesis, so their diploma thesis, to do data collection, because they don't have the resources to collect high quality data. So the advisors should somehow motivate their students to reuse the data that already exists, and more of this data is available in various repositories. And maybe, if somebody else tries to use data looking from another perspective, this opens the possibility for something new, for innovation. So I think we should all think about ways how to motivate the reuse of data, so to make more of that.
This is a very interesting point, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I hope the students, will kind of note it and follow your suggestion. So when you don't have enough resources, you can always reuse other people's data and see it in another way, analyze it in another way. And this is still original research, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think we have any further questions in the chat. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Slavec. I would like to thank, so we get to the end of this event. So I would like to thank Dr. Slavec, Dr. Petek, and Dr. Kapoor for their interesting presentations, which are all already available, I think, now. And they are already published in the webinar program. Now, before we end this meeting, please fill out this short survey that will appear on your screen. So please, could you? Oh, sorry. There's another question. I see it now. Yuri Hladnik is asking, what about the measurement data that was already published? May you use it for your studies? Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's just come up.
Is this question for me?
Yeah, this is for you. Yeah, it was.
Because I'm not sure what he means with measurement data. But I will try to respond. So measurement data, so I think this applies to any data. So my response is yes. So if somebody published the data, so the same way when you do your research, you cite other researchers, what they published. And if the data is published, you can cite the data. So that's if the data has a DOI, so it's published somewhere, you can always cite the data. So if it's, of course, if it's openly published and if it is shared in a way that you understand it and you can use it, You can always, of course, download it and use it. And if you use it, you cite the researchers that collect the data. There is also actually, as I mentioned, my background is in social sciences, and in social sciences we have the Slovenian Social Science Data Archive, where if you can publish a data set, you also receive some secret points. And but the problem is that in other fields, in Slovenia, there is no repository, so no data archive like that. And it would be nice to have it, because that way it would be easier than to cite other researchers who share the data, and also for the researchers who share the data, that's a motivation, because this is recognized in research assessment. And it's really a problem because other fields don't have that. Maybe they will have, but for now, as I'm aware, it's only the Slovenian Social Science Data Archive that it counts in secrets.